Welcome to my YouTube channel, Grace Man Knowledge or GMK.
In this episode, we'll be looking at IAS 23. What is IAS 23 addressing? IAS 23 is addressing borrowing cost. The first thing you need to note when it comes to IAS 23, which is borrowing cost, is there cannot be borrowing cost without borrowing funds. Now, I would like to differentiate between borrowing costs and borrowing funds. What is borrowing funds? Borrowing funds are simply funds that are borrowed for one purpose or the other. What is borrowing cost? Borrowing cost is the interest and other associated costs incurred by an entity that is connected to borrowing funds. Borrowing cost is the interest and other costs incurred by an entity in connection to what borrowing funds. Because what I said earlier, the first thing you need to notice what is borrowing cost is related to borrowing funds. So any cost that relates to finance cost, when we talk about finance, we are talking about interest and other costs, finance charge and the rest, that an entity incurs and the cost is in connection to borrowing fund. That is what borrowing cost. And you also note that when we talk about borrowing cost, we're talking about interest and other costs associated with borrowing cost, borrowing funds, excuse me. We also know that ideally they are always expensed in the profit or loss account. But IAS 23 borrowing cost is now saying that borrowing cost that is related. Let me read what we have. The borrowing cost prescribes the accounting treatment for what? For borrowing cost. So I said earlier that naturally borrowing cost, interest, they are expensed in the profit or loss account. But borrowing cost is now taking it a step further. That is, borrowing cost should be capitalized. You can see that this is now something different from what is obtainable, because interest expense ideally should be expensed in profit or loss account. But borrowing cost is not saying that there are some interest expense that should not be expensed in the profit or loss account. What does that mean? That means they should be capitalized. It's not saying that borrowing costs should be capitalized if they are directly attributable. Recall that under IAS 16, borrowing cost that is under the condition or that meet the criteria of borrowing cost that is attributable to the construction of PPE under IAS 16, it was capitalized and added to the cost of the asset to recognize the statement of what profit, statement of financial position, excuse me. So IAS is saying that borrowing cost should be capitalized if there is a condition there, if they are directly attributable to the acquisition, one, construction or production of a what, of a qualifying asset. The question that comes to mind again is, what is qualifying asset? A qualifying asset is an asset that takes a long period of time to produce or make available for sale. So when it takes a long period of time to get an asset ready for intended use and for the sale, that is what we call what? Qualifying asset. Just a little recap. There can't be borrowing for cost without borrowing funds. What is borrowing cost? Borrowing cost is the finance cost or other associated cost or interest and associated cost incurred by an entity that is associated to borrowing funds. Now, naturally, finance cost is usually expensed in profit or loss. But the caveat here is, if the finance cost is directly attributable to what? To construction, production, acquisition of an asset, it should be capitalized. What does capitalization mean? Recall that an expense can be treated in two ways. An expense can either be expensed into the profit or loss account, right, or debited to profit or loss account, or what? Or capitalized. So capitalization here simply means that instead of expensing such borrowing cost in the profit or loss account, it will be added to the what makes the cost of the asset to be recognized in the statement of financial position. Now we go to the three ways. I call it the three ways in borrowing cost, IAS 23. What are the three ways? Number one, when to capitalize borrowing cost. The second one is when to suspend capitalization of borrowing cost. The third one is when to cease the what? The capitalization of borrowing cost. I have the first one here when to commence capitalization. I have the second one here when to what suspend capitalization of borrowing cost. I have the third one here when to what cease capitalization of borrowing cost. What are we saying here? We are saying that the first one when to commence, meaning that the fact that a particular fund was borrowed or is borrowed and it is attributable to acquisition of or construction or production of a qualifying asset doesn't mean that once it is borrowed we just capitalize. No, there are conditions that it must meet before it can be what capitalized, and this is the first way when to commence capitalization of what of borrowing cost. Number one, when the expenditure on the asset is being incurred. What does it mean? This simply mean that when the borrowing funds is expended on the asset. Of course, we know three things here: asset acquisition, construction, and what and production of the qualifying asset. So once a borrowing fund is incurred on the qualifying asset, that means that what it has met the first criteria of what of commencing of capitalizing the what of the commencement of the capitalization of the borrowing cost. The second one, when the borrowing costs are being incurred on the fund, so that now means that I said that you cannot separate, you can literally not separate borrowing fund from borrowing cost. So these borrowing funds we use in the first criterion, right? Once there is a borrowing cost attached to it, that means that what that borrowing cost that is attached to that borrowing fund must be what must be capitalized. When borrowing costs are being incurred on the funds used on the cost of what of production, that means what the borrowing cost must be capitalized. When the activities to prepare the asset for the intended use or sale are in progress, in as much as the construction is still in progress, what happen? The borrowing cost that is attributable to the borrowing fund that is used in the production must also be capitalized. So we go to the second one. The second one is when to suspend capitalization of. So before we go to the second one, let me just paint one or two scenarios here. Say for example, PPL borrowed an X amount on the 1st of May 1997 and construction started 1st of July 1997. Please note that as at when the fund was borrowed, construction has not started. Hence, borrowing costs cannot be capitalized. Why? Because construction has not started as at when the money was borrowed. Look at that way. When expenditure, that means that this money that was borrowed has not been used in the production, in the construction. So that now means that any interest element prior to the beginning of construction will be what will be expensed. Excuse me. So only the borrowing cost from the beginning of the construction will be what will be capitalized. Okay. Again, it's also possible that we have this vice versa. What is the vice versa? The vice versa is PPS started construction 1st of May 1997 but did not borrow any fund to use till 1st of October 1997. That means that because the construction started before the fund was borrowed, right? And the fund borrowed was not used in the production until 1st of October. That means that the capitalization of the borrowing cost will start from this 1st of October. So you can see the flip side of it. Here, the fund was borrowed prior to construction, excuse me. So capitalization started when construction started. Here, the fund was borrowed before after construction started. That now means that what because the fund was borrowed after construction started, that means that the borrowing fund was not used in the construction until it was borrowed. So that now means that what capitalization of the borrowing fund that is attributable to this borrowing capitalization of borrowing cost, excuse me, that is attributable to this borrowing fund will not be capitalized until it was employed. It is employed or it is used in the construction or production of this qualifying asset. So we go to the second one, when to suspend capitalization of borrowing costs. When should we suspend capitalization of borrowing costs? This means that we could have commenced the capitalization of borrowing costs, but at one point or the other, in the course of the production, we suspend it pending. When active development is what is interrupted, this means that when active development in the acquisition, production, or construction of a qualifying asset is suspended, that also means or is interrupted or suspended too, that simply means that what for those periods, what will happen to borrowing costs? Borrowing costs will be expensed and not capitalized. So in any situation, knowing fully well that if IAS 23 is not applicable, capitalizing borrowing costs with respect to construction, acquisition, and production of qualifying assets, once they are not attributable, what does that mean? That means that what the natural treatment of interest or finance costs or borrowing costs will be expressed in the profit or loss account. So once there is suspension, that means that the borrowing costs during those periods of suspension of what of active development will be expensed to the what profit or loss account. So we go to the third when. What is the third when? The third when is when to cease capitalization of what of borrowing costs. When do we cease capitalization of borrowing costs? When all activities necessary to prepare the qualifying asset. Again, don't forget the definition of qualifying asset. Qualifying assets are assets that it takes substantial period of time to get ready for use, for intended use, and for what? And for resale. So when all activities necessary to prepare the qualifying asset for its intended use or sale are complete. So once the qualifying asset is what is complete, right? I mean the production, the construction and acquisition is completed. What does that mean? That would mean that what any borrowing cost, right, that is attributable to that borrowing fund will be what will be suspended, will not be capitalized, but either will be what will be expensed in the gain or loss account. So take this. That means that the opposite of what capitalization of borrowing costs and other costs is what is the expensing of what of borrowing costs. So once a borrowing cost is not capitalized, it will be what expensed. Once a borrowing cost is not expensed, it will be what capitalized based on the what IAS 23 borrowing cost criteria. So we go to the first example. What is the first example? The first example is saying that Parkway Project Limited is constructing a plant which will take 9 months to complete. Parkway Project Limited has obtained a 10% 150 million naira bank loan for the purpose of constructing the plant on first. So that means that two things here. One, Parkway Project Limited got that loan on the 1st of January 2022, right? One. So PPL got the loan on 1/1/2022. PPL also started the construction on what 1/1/2022. Make reference to the previous days. You can see here that PPL got the loan on the 1st of January 2022, right? PPL also started spending the loan, the borrowing fund, on what? On the project on the same day. A little recap. So that means that because they both happen on the same day, it simply means that the borrowing cost attributable to this borrowed fund will be capitalized. Say for example, let's assume that PPL got the loan on the 1st of December 2021. That will mean that the borrowing cost between 1st of December 2021 to 31st of December 2021 will be expensed. Why? The borrowing cost from 1st of January till the completion of this construction will be what? Will be capitalized. So the fund was borrowed on the same day and what the construction started on the same day. So because the fund was borrowed on the same day and the fund was employed into the construction on the same day, That means that the capitalization of the borrowing cost attributable to the construction of this plant will be what? Will be capitalized till the end of the time. So again, we take 9 months time to complete 9 months. Of course, we know that interest is what? Is annual 10%. So what do we do? The first thing we need to do is to what? Is to calculate the borrowing cost that will be capitalized. So what will be the annual borrowing cost in the first place? The annual borrowing cost will be what? 10% times what? 150 million. So that means we have what? 15 million as the borrowing cost. So these are our what? Now we go further to what? To calculate the borrowing cost that we capitalized. Going to our first when to commence, right? When expenditure on the asset is being incurred, one. Two, when borrowing costs are being incurred. So number one, expenditure, that means the borrowed fund is being incurred on the asset. Two, when the borrowing costs what are being incurred on the asset. And number three, when the activities to prepare the asset for its intended use for are in progress. So we are saying that it took this plant 9 months to reproduce. That simply means that the part of this borrowing cost of 15 million that we capitalize will only be the one for the period of the construction, and it took 9 months to construct this plant. So that now means that we have what? 9 divided by 12 multiplied by what? 15 million. We have a 3 here. We have a 3 here. We have 4. We have a 4 here. 4 here will give us 3.750 million. 3 multiplied by 3.750 million will give us 11,250,000. This means that 11,350,000 from this 15 million will be what? Will be capitalized. While 3.750 million will be what? Will be expense. The next question will now be, what will be the treatment of this same plant in the statement of financial position, or how much, right, will be recognized as the cost of this plant in the statement of financial position. Now the cost of the plant is what? Is 150 million. Because we are capitalizing the borrowing cost of 11.250 million, the borrowing cost is what? 11,250,000. That means that the cost to recognize in the statement of financial position of Park Equity Limited is what? 161,250,000. Going to the second scenario, Grace Holdings borrowed 40 million naira borrowing fund at the rate of 20%, the rate of borrowing cost, to finance the production of 2 assets, both of which were expected to take 16 months. So that's talking about the period of time it will take to get the qualifying assets ready for use or resale. The fund was borrowed on the 1st of January 2025, but production started during 2027. The loan facility was drawn on the 1st and was utilized as follows. Take note of something. Then we go back to our first one. When to commence. A little recap, we have 3 ways when it comes to IAS 23 borrowing cost. We have the first one, when to commence the capitalization of borrowing cost. Again, if you are not capitalizing borrowing cost, you are doing what? You are expensing. So meaning that the part of the borrowing cost that you are not capitalizing should be what? Should be expensed in the what? Profit or loss account. The second one, when to suspend, and the third one, when to cease capitalization of what? Of borrowing cost. Those 3 ingredients are very vital in understanding IAS 23. The money was borrowed on the 1st of January 2025. That means that from 1st of January 2025 to 31st of December 2026, the borrowing cost will be expressed in the profit and loss account, right? While capitalization will start on the what? On the 1st of January 2025. Why? Because that was when the borrowing fund was employed into what? The construction of the two assets. So we go. Asset one. The money was drawn for asset one. First asset, excuse me, on the 1st of what? Of January 2027, right? 7 million naira was drawn. Same thing for assets, second asset. For asset one, another part of the fund was drawn on the what? On the 1st of July. That means that the part, right, that remained, okay, for example, on the first now, that means that the total of what? 17 million was drawn on the first. That means that the borrowing cost on 13 million naira will be expensed in the profit or loss account. That's what that means. No, that's 23 million naira, excuse me. Will be expensed because 17 plus 23 will give us what? 40 million. So, why the money will be expensed? And let's go again. So, the second tranche was what? Was employed, right? Was incurred, excuse me, in the what? In the construction of the what? Of the building on the 1st of July. That means that the capitalization of the borrowing cost attributable to the 23 million balance of the 40 million will be capitalized from what? From 1st of July 2027 to the end of the project. So look at this now. We're told that the project will take 16 months. That will mean that this 16 months is equal to what? 1 year and what? And 4 months. 12 months make a year plus what? 4 months. Right? So we go into solving. So we ask, what is the borrowing cost to be capitalized for each asset? And after calculating the borrowing cost to be capitalized for each asset, we also ask to calculate the cost of each asset. Here we go. So let's do it this way. We have assets A here. We have, let's calculate for asset A. For asset A, on the 1st of January, 7 million was what? Was incurred at 20%. That means that what? The borrowing cost. That would be 20% times 7 million multiply, because this was incurred at the beginning and it took 16 months to do what? It took 16 months to construct the building. So this will be 20% times what? 7 million naira multiplied by 16 months will be one whole number. No, will be 16/12. Right? So this can further be broken down to 20/100 multiplied by 7 million multiplied by 16/12. So we can as well take that to, so this will give us 1,866,666 naira 67 kobo. So this can be equals to 1,866,667 naira. So this is the what? This is the borrowing cost that will be capitalized with respect to the what? To the first pool of funds on what? On assets, first asset A. We go to the what? We go to the second pool, 7,500, 7.5 million naira. So we have 20% times, let me go straight. We have 20/100 multiplied by 7.5 million. Notes. We have 16 months. but this 7.5 million was not drawn until the 7th month. So we have January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, October, November, December, 12 months. So we have 16 months. So out of 16 months, 6 months are already gone. That means that the interest that will be capitalized with respect to this second tranche that was incurred in the building, in the construction of this building, will be what? Will be 10 months. So that now means that we have 20 over 100 multiplied by 7.5 million multiplied by what? 10 over 12. That means that the borrowing cost in the earlier 6 months will be what? Will be expensed in the statement of what? Profit or loss and other comprehensive income. What does this mean? This is saying, so this will now be equals to 7.5 million divided by 6. 7.5 million divided by 6 gives us what? 1.250,000. We can then say that the borrowing cost to be capitalized with respect to the first asset is. This now means that the borrowing cost to capitalize with respect to the asset A is 3,116,667 naira. Now we answer the second question straight away as relate to question A. Calculate the what? The cost of each asset. The cost of each asset would be, for asset A, 7 million was first incurred plus 7.5 million. That means that for the cost we have 14,500,000. Right, so what is that the borrowing cost? The borrowing cost to be capitalized is 3,160,667. That now gives us. So we go to the calculation of borrowing cost to be capitalized with respect to asset B and the cost of what? Of asset B. So we use the same approach used in calculating the borrowing cost for asset A. Borrowing cost 20% of 10 million naira multiply by what? 16 over 12. So this, so we have a 2 year, we have a 3 year, 2 year, we have a 8. So this gives us 8 million, because this becomes 1 million divided by 3. So what will be our borrowing cost to be capitalized as at there? So we have 2,666,667 according to old number. So what will be the borrowing cost to be capitalized with respect to the second tranche of the borrowing fund that was incurred on the building? We have 20% using the same approach because they have the same period. 20 over 100 multiplied by 15,000, 15.5 million, excuse me, multiplied by. Now recall that the construction was to take 16 months, but this was drawn in the what? In the 7th month. So that now means that the part that will only be capitalized will be the remaining 10 months in the construction, 10 over 12. So we go again. So that now means that we have 15.5 divided by 6. That gives us 2,583,333 naira. So what is now the total borrowing cost with respect to the asset B? That now gives us. This will be the total borrowing cost to be capitalized with respect to the second asset. The question goes further, asking us to calculate the cost to be recognized in the statement of financial position with respect to what? the asset B. What will be the cost? The cost of asset B. Borrowing fund 10 million plus 15.5 million. 10 million plus 15.5 million is what? 25.5 million. We now add the borrowing cost of 5,250,000. That now gives us 30,750,000. That means that the cost to recognize the strength of financial position with respect to item B is 30,750,000 naira. Thank you so much for watching. Do not forget to like, share,